Since 2020, conventional obstetrics and even natural birthing world practitioners have been captured by so much medical tyranny. And yet at the same time, the way our babies are brought into the world is the most impactful for their overall well-being in the short and the long term. For over 13 years, I have been able to clinically measure the impact of birth trauma on our children, and never has it been more of a risk to move through the birthing systems without full consciousness and ownership. Young parents have always asked me about childhood shots for their kids, and we have always been committed to informed consent. Very quickly into 2020, an immediate new question parents would ask in the office was, what about home birth? The demand for a more aligned and conscious birth is greater than ever, and there's significant shortages in aligned providers in our communities, especially birth doulas. The world is waiting for women like you to do the brave and honorable work of holding space for the greatest rite of passage in a woman's life, conceiving and becoming a mother. This is your opportunity. If you're wondering whether doulaship is your path to purpose, with a generous dash of abundance and sustainable success, my good friend and colleague Ayla Cuenca's Uncovering Birth Doula training starts May 15th. Click the link in our show notes for more information on her masterclass, open house Q&A, and this amazing training. Let's save our communities by saving our moms and babies through an empowered birthing experience. Welcome to another episode of the Future Generations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stanton Hom, and this episode is with Reinette Senum. She is an amazing human being. She is the founder of Save Our Skies. This conversation on chemtrails, contrails, weather manipulation, cloud seeding, geoengineering, all the things that you might think you know about it, may not be exactly what you know, right? It may not be exactly what you know, in a sense that I heard an interview with her recently, and I knew I had to bring her to our platform. And what's crazy is it isn't as simple as walking out and looking at the skies and being like, oh my gosh, they're spraying us today. Whether you see it or not, they're spraying. And whether you see it or not, they're manipulating it. Whether you see it or not, they are weaponizing it. And whether you see it or not, there is no accountability and no liability. And there is chronic levels of heavy metals literally raining on us, that she has data, not only that it's affecting us, because I've heard more than most providers likely do today, from families who believe in health and medical freedom, who believe in natural health, who believe in self-healing, all the things that we believe in this podcast, that you do everything right. Why are my kids expressing this chronic challenge? And why this is important is because just like shots and vaccines and the paucity of science behind those in terms of safety, the same is true with geoengineering, and the same is true in maybe a much more bigger way, because she's able to test rainwater, and she's able to help us test trees that have died and trees that have fallen. She is having very clear linear paths towards pollinators and towards animals, especially where she lives in higher altitudes. It's not as simple as we shared on this podcast about things like droughts, which are literally manufactured in the 50,000 plus lakes that are all man-made in the United States, that give a perception of scarcity in water. We just dug a well here, and in the end, it has been confirmed through many interviews that I've had, but just like digging a well on your property, that there is actually no issue with water. And it's not as simple as, in California, they talk about these beetles that are eating these trees because of the drought. And what we do know for sure is that the blanketed nature of these nanoparticulates and these heavy metals, largely we're seeing more than ever radically healthy and vibrant families going down. And we need answers for it. And we need tools. And Reinette gives us many of those answers, and gives us many of those tools to do the work and play the long game to put an end to it. Thank you for tuning in. This episode is incredible. Genuinely love and appreciate you all. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Future Generations podcast, providing you with the world-changing content necessary to inspire you, your family, and our planet to a life of optimal health potential. We'll help you make the choices that powerfully influence the lives you bring into this world. It's time to strengthen our resolve to do better now and for our future generations. I'm your host, Dr. Stanton Hom. Okay, welcome to another episode of the Future Generations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stanton Hom, and this is going to be, it's going to be one of the more enlightening episodes. We know that there are weather manipulation agendas. We know there's cloud seeding. We know that here in San Diego that, and this is crazy, Reinette. We have a quote homeless population. We have a border issue, and we had the rains, and we had flooding. And no one really looked at the storm drains, and the storm drains were full of all the things and the belongings of the homeless people. And then all of a sudden, neighborhoods in San Diego were just absolutely decimated. And so it's an interesting dynamic. We all know that there are things going on. We know there's nefarious stuff. We know that there's stuff that we see that may not be exactly what is the reality. And I was resonating with you and working and your work with Save Our Skies, and I would love to know more.
Well, first of all, I just happened to be down there in San Diego visiting also Melissa Grace, and the southeastern part got flooded. I think the waters rose within 30 minutes about 6.5 feet.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's crazy. And you do have weather modification programs going on there for sure. I mean, it's out there, it's reported on. And so, just to give people a brief understanding, I'm up here in Northern California, and it was actually about this time last year that we were getting records amount of snow. In fact, just above us here in the Sierras, they had 60 feet of snow. We had 6 feet of snow, which was uncommon. We usually get a few inches, maybe a foot or so max. And 100 years ago, we used to get that kind of snow, but not so much these days. Mm-hmm. And it was devastating because our trees are dying, and I'll get into why they're dying. And they're snapping in half, and ponderosas are busting in half that are built for snow. And beautiful old mother oak trees are just splitting in half, limbs dropping off. And, homes were pummeled, roadways were blocked. People couldn't make it to the woodshed. There's so much snow. And also the thing that's really not being reported whatsoever is a lot of the wildlife didn't survive.
Wow.
Especially a little further up, 5,000, 6,000 feet, 7,000 feet. I've talked to people, and I've seen a difference here. The bears didn't make it because the snow started heavy in November and did not clear up till May. Wow. And so the bears didn't make it. The deers didn't make it. The squirrels, the raccoons. I don't have the squirrels that I used to have here, have not seen. The raccoons have not returned. The fox have not returned, have not seen any hares. And nobody talked about how it was absolutely devastating to the wildlife. It just hasn't recovered. And that's, to me, it's so heartbreaking. So to let folks know, I'm in Nevada City, California, Northern California, Sierra foothills. And before COVID struck, I had been a 2-time mayor, council person here in Nevada City, California. And before that, I was working against, fighting against 5G and the proliferation, also working on geoengineering. As a young girl, I used to sail here in Nevada County. I was raised in this area since I was, 4. So I'm familiar with the skies. And as a young girl, I don't remember seeing these persistent contrails at all. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I started noticing, I don't know, I'm thinking 2006 to 2007, somewhere around there. And then, of course, now I see them more than ever. And so with this last winter being so devastating, and the snow just being really weird, and it doesn't even look quite natural. And of course, there's reports where snow is not melting when you put a flame against it, some weird stuff. So we had a bunch of mama warriors around the state of California during this storm last year, and they took hail samples and water samples, and we sent them off to McCampbell's certified lab. They came back with all these heavy metals, aluminum, strontium, barium, titanium. I mean, the list goes on and on. Wow. And it's what's this doing in our rainwater? What's this doing in our hail? And we've known about this. We've seen this. It's been documented by other nonprofits and other individuals for a long time, but we wanted to see it for ourselves. And I just kept thinking that somebody out there's certain faces out there in the geoengineering world who kind of have told us and written books that we've got this covered. We're going out there, we're suing them, and nothing's been happening. Nothing's been happening. So being an activist of over 20 years and on the front lines. And now that I was kind of beyond COVID, which was on our front door for 3 years, and I had to drop geoengineering once COVID struck, as you know, that's how I got to know you.
Yep.
I decided to start an organization called Gen 7 as I was running for governor a couple of years ago. No political affiliation. It was based upon the seventh generation principle, which is every decision we make today should serve 7 generations from now. And so we took that. It's a 501c3. And under it, because it's an umbrella essentially for Save Our Skies. If you go to saveourskies.org, you'll find us there. And I went out and I found the best legal team I could find, and we decided that we didn't want to put all of our eggs in one basket, which is like, okay, we're going to go through the court system because we know it takes years. It doesn't move quickly. We don't have a lot of time. Depends upon the judge. Depends upon your argument. There's all these factors, right? And so we decided to have a multi-pronged approach. So it was, okay, legal. We're going to go through the court system. We also have been working with Cal Washington. He and his legal team have worked on notice of liabilities, which they've worked on with 5G and smart meters, and they're now applying it with geoengineering. They have created a first draft, from what Cal told me, for Canada. And now they're going to be drafting one very similarly, but for the US. So the notice of liability is very important. We can go out there and put on notice our Air and Water Quality Board advisors, right, and commissioners, are the aviation companies who are doing the weather modification, the pilots, and we can actually hold them personally accountable, right? And I tell people that if a crime is being committed, if harm is being done, yes, as a former elected official, I'm protected. But if I'm committing a crime, I'm no longer protected in that seat.
Right.
And then we can go after that individual or go after me personally. So we're doing that as well. And the other thing that's very, very important is the ground crews, what we call actually the sky watchers. These are the people who are actually going out there and learning how to read the skies. And the objective is to be able to figure out, and differentiate myth from fact.
Right.
And I have to say that this year has been jaw-dropping for me as far as my evolution and understanding of what's going on. So one of the individuals who's one of our advisors, and I've got a really nice, good core of people, legal folks and meteorologists, and Jim Lee from climateviewer.com, Catherine Sari, who's a sky watcher who's blazing a trail on how to do the water samples, what to test for, how to do public records requests, how to communicate with your elected officials about what's going on and so on. We have all this compiled on Save Our Skies, and it's the Save Our Skies, or SOS Skywatcher PowerPoint Toolkit. It's on the landing page. It's about 75 slides, and in there is a toolkit on how to test your rainwater, what to look for, how to fill out the form, how to identify the aircraft, how to identify aircraft that are doing cloud seeding. There's certain signatures of flight paths, like a figure 8. Back and forth, usually before a storm starts, or a circle around and around and around. And these are generally cloud seeding programs. So what we're trying to do is teach people, to empower people in their respective locations so they can actually get used to using flight radar, or what is it, ABDES exchange, flight tracking, and say, okay, that's what that aircraft is doing. That's what that aircraft is. What is this doing? As well as what are the atmospheric conditions to create what are called these persistent contrails. And this is the paradigm shift. So one of the things Jim Lee has been pounding away and trying to teach people is letting people know, like, look, there are geoengineering programs going on. There are thousands of geoengineering patents. There are devices and things you can add on, later on aircraft and so on. But I was under the impression, because that's what I've been told by those out in the geoengineering world who are kind of the face of it, that the commercial aircraft or anything you see up there that's spraying back and forth, they have nozzles, they have big canisters, blah, blah, blah. Well, that might be the case. You won't know it unless you're looking at the atmospheric conditions, looking at the flight track, radar. Then you can go, oh yeah, this is expected to see these persistent contrails. Are like, no, wait a second, this should not be happening. Looks like an actual geoengineering program going on. Right. Now, what I was taught by Jim Lee, and I'm trying to teach others, is that what we know for a fact, and this is really quite well backed up, is that within the jet fuel itself, the commercial jet fuel itself, are these nanoparticulate matters, and it's nano size. So even though we send these are like we've got jet fuel and we send it off to the labs, unless they have a spectrometer that can actually test for nanoparticulate matter, you can't really pick it all up. But what we know is that in the fuel, when it's burned, it creates this kind of graphene lamina that is coating soot. And in the soot is the heavy metals, the aluminum, the barium, the strontium, the cobalt, the lead, the copper, the sulfur, all these different things. Now, it's nanoparticulate matter. And you're thinking, this can't be that bad if it's nanoparticulate matter. But what you have to understand is that we're burning about 15 million barrels of jet fuel a day.
Wow.
Now, what happened, which came on and challenged most of us, was we have a Telegram channel that Catherine Sari, who's our lead Skywatcher trainer, and Mama Warrior, who was the one who had tested all this rainwater last year in the hail. And so a gentleman by the name of Jeff, we call him Jeff Ray, he's a meteorologist, and his job was that he used to work on these aircraft carriers, and his job was to actually look and read the atmosphere. So he'd look at barometric pressure, he would look at moisture content, he would look at temperature. It has to be like minus 40 degrees or colder. And this was because of those jets are flying off the aircraft carrier, especially like in, unfriendly territories. You don't want a persistent contrail leading them back to the aircraft carrier. So his job would be to read the atmosphere and say, okay, see this right here at the 35,000 foot level or the 20,000 level. This is where you can fly without a persistent contrail leading you back to the aircraft carrier. So when Jeff stepped in as a meteorologist, say, hey guys, I want to tell you something. This is why you're some days and some hours of the day you're seeing persistent contrails and sometimes you're not, is because of atmospheric condition. Well, that set a lot of people off. They're like, wait a second, you're a mole, you're a troll, you're lying. And I was like, no, let's talk about this. Like, okay, then let's put you to the test. Can you please then every day just predict, okay, this is the day or the time you're going to see these persistent contrails? And he's like, yeah, I can do that. So he'd go out there, he'd read what's called a radiosonde. So there are people around the world, believe it or not. I thought this was through all satellites. It's not correct. There are individuals out there who step out of their door twice a day. They release these little radiosonde equipment with a weather balloon, and it goes up and it reads and collects all the data up in first the troposphere and then the stratosphere and so on. And then what they do is they can read this thing called the Appelman chart. And it's through that they can actually predict, okay, this is where the conditions are such where you are going to see persistent contrails known as chemtrails. So Jeff started saying, okay, today from 2 to 6, you're going to see persistent contrails. Boom.
Interesting.
Next day, you're not going to see anything. The conditions aren't right. Next day, okay, you're going to see all day tomorrow, and it's going to be bad. You're probably not going to be, being seeing the sun by 3 o'clock. And boom, 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 boom. This went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. Why is this important? Because commercial aircraft has increased so much. Like every 10 years, it doubles. Every 10 years, right?
Wow.
So because there's so much commercial aircraft, that we are now seeing these streaks more than ever. And the sad part is this, is whether you see, they're spraying today, whether you see those persistent contrails or not, that the people in the geoengineering world call chemtrails, whether you see them or not, you're being sprayed every single day from the commercial aircraft, the commercial airliners, which is not good. Right. And of course, we have people saying, well, we need to get to biofuels. We need to change it. We need this and that. Well, be careful what you wish for because it could it's called Javon's paradox, where you can make matters worse by trying to make them better. So we tell people to be careful what you're asking for because you might replace the jet fuel with something worse, right? So that's that piece, right? That's commercial aircraft. Now, again, I want to really state this. Are there geoengineering programs going on? Yes, there are. There's ionosphere heaters. There is HARP. There are sounding rockets. Like Elon Musk is sounding off these rockets. They're shooting through the stratosphere. They're punching holes in the ozone layer. It's not good. It's releasing titanium. None of that stuff is happening. But the commercial aircraft itself, the reason why we're seeing those streaks, and you'll see more and more and more of them as you get into more metropolitan areas near major airports. Now, what's really bad for the West Coast is that we have the commercial shipping industry. Now, when NAFTA changed all of the manufacturing industries in America and basically sent all of the manufacturing industries overseas. We're taking our raw materials here, shipping them over in gigantic cargo ships for the products to be made, and then shipping them back in these gigantic, huge cargo ships that are literally like the size of floating cities. And until 2020, they have these gigantic smokestacks, and they were burning what's called bunker fuel. And bunker fuel is the nastiest, foulest, dirtiest fuel out there. So this was causing what's called shipping tracks. If you Google shipping tracks, you'll see these kind of white tracks all over the Pacific Ocean. And they kind of start zigging around like this because the wind kind of blows it this way and that way until finally it's creating cirrus clouds, just like the commercial aircraft. They are inadvertently creating cirrus clouds. The commercial airliner is inadvertently creating cirrus clouds, and they're actually changing the weather through commercial airliners. Same thing has been happening with the shipping industry. Now, since 2020, they've switched from bunker fuels to more of these sustainable fuels or alternative, fuels. But the problem is, we don't know what's in them. Sometimes they're using chicken fat. Sometimes they're using plant materials that have been sprayed with glyphosates. What happens when you burn glyphosate at a high heat? We don't know. Right. And so it's been creating a cirrus cloud layer over the Pacific Ocean, changing and cooling over the Pacific Ocean, and also acidifying the ocean, which is horrific. So all of that, and again, they've changed over from the bunker fuels, but we don't really know what they're using. All of that is just coming onto the West Coast big time. And we are getting slammed. And what's interesting is when you take rainwater samples, let's say in the Bay Area, versus along the western slopes of the Sierra foothills, you will find there's a much higher concentration of the heavy metals, not in the Bay Area, but along the Sierra foothills, because that's where it just consolidates. That's why we're seeing such massive tree death. People are saying, oh, it's the beetles, it's the beetles. No, it's not the beetles. We know for a fact we've had bark has been tested, tree bark has been tested in the past, and the trees are very high with aluminum and other metals. So what's happening is this aluminum is actually clogging up the channels of the trees. The trees are not able to absorb the waters, the sugars, and the nutrients and minerals, and they're dying from the inside out. That's why you'll see a tree looking perfectly healthy, and the next thing you know, it's dying. It's cut in half. It's dropping over. It's split in half, or it'll be attacked by bark beetle. Bark beetle is just a symptom of a larger issue, right? They come in when trees are weakened, so what's weakening them? And so that is why last year when we had record snow, we were watching ponderosa trees built for snow snapping in half. 150-year-old mother oak trees, strong and powerful, splitting in half, is because they're dying from the inside out. You go to Yosemite, and these gorgeous old ancient trees are just dying left and right. Wow. And they're dying from the inside out. So this is a big issue. It's a huge issue, and it's not being addressed. And so what we're trying to do is teach people how to read the commercial aircraft through like Flight Radar 24 software, and also how to become familiar with the flights over their heads. I mean, you can get so good that you'll hear a certain flight, go, oh, I know that's a ba-ba-ba, or that's the Black Hawk helicopter, or no, that's the military. You'll become very familiar. And then be able to identify, okay, the atmosphere is such, the conditions are such in the atmosphere that yes, we will be seeing persistent contrails all day today. But let's say you read the Appleman chart, right? You look at you do the analysis, and you're like, wait a second, we should not be having the persistent contrails today, but I'm seeing a streak here and I'm seeing a streak there. And then you can go on the Flight Radar, the app, and look and go, hey, wait, what is that? And many times, unfortunately, these geoengineering programs, the actual, geoengineering by design programs, many times when you go to look up the plane, it's like NA, they won't give you the tail number. They won't tell you who the aviation company is, whether it's an alphabet agency or the military or a private corporation. They won't. So that's what we're trying to do, is work our way up. So what we're doing is right now is we're actually focusing on cloud seeding. And I know that all the streaks are happening, and we're working on that. In fact, Jim Lee is working on some legislation. There's a lot of legislation out there right now. We're hearing about Tennessee. We're hearing about New Hampshire. We're hearing about Texas. I think the New Hampshire legislation is better, but it's been brought back to the drawing board. But it has to actually include monitoring, like real world, real time monitoring. It has to also include like real teeth, like, okay, this is a crime. You're going to be
Yeah.
thrown away in jail and going to cost you a lot of money. It needs actual, testing, like regular testing around the country, around the world, a system and network put into place. And what we're seeing is a lot of folks, like in the Tennessee bill, it was written very, very short, truncated little version of compared to New Hampshire's. And it's missing the mark. I mean,
Wow.
it's good that they're doing this. It's waking people up, like it's real. Legislation is being authored, it's being sponsored, it's real, but it's really missing the mark. So Jim Lee is working on it, on legislation. Once that is done, it'll be a first draft. I'm sure some of us will take a look at it and give our input. What I'm going to try to do is not try, but I will, is I'll take it down to Sacramento and go out there and see if I can find a sponsor. So it's good that we got the legislation going, because that's what we're going to have to do to deal with the airline industry. In the meantime, what we're doing on the ground is actually trying to teach people to identify the cloud seeding companies. The reason why we're doing that is there has been this great assumption that for decades now, cloud seeding has been going on. In fact, if you go to climateviewer.com, which is Jim Lee's website, he's uploaded over the 2,000 different geoengineering patents on his website. He has all of the publication, all the print, all the media from the mid 1800s up to about 2017. Weather modification started in the mid 1800s. They started using
What was that
fire.
website again?
Climateviewer.com.
Viewer. Gotcha. Okay.
And so they started using fire because when you have gigantic forest fires, what happens is that it'll create these big thunderheads. And what happens is nature has a way of stopping the fire, creating a thunder, big thunderhead rain clouds raining before the fire gets there and snuffing it out. That's not happening these days because we have such a man-made cirrus cloud layer around the planet. Those thunder clouds, right? Those thunderheads, those rain clouds are not allowed to really, to multiply and put out the fire. So it's an interesting thing that's going on with the wildfires. And so what we're trying to do now is we're trying to teach people to identify the cloud seeding because it's been going on for decades. People assume it's safe. It's like, oh yeah, we've been cloud seeding. That's no big deal. You can do it with these kind of canisters from the ground. Many times they'll have Cessnas, smaller planes with flares, and they'll shoot silver iodide and so on. Well, what we've come to find out, our attorneys working with us, is that they're not doing environmental impact reports. In fact, it's required since 1972, federal law, that if there's any weather modification programs, you are required by law to report them to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the Department of Commerce. So if you go onto NOAA, NOAA.com, you put in NOAA weather modification program reporting, you'll see there's a little button on the left. You click on that and you'll see just under 1,000 different weather modification programs going on. Cloud seeding, snow augmentation. People ask, well, who the heck's doing that and why? It's mostly power companies who want extra water for hydroelectricity. It's water districts who want water for their reservoirs. And they're the biggest perpetrators.
Wow.
So we have entities who are going out there and they're cloud seeding, but they're using studies, EIR and studies from the 1990s, which is completely illegal. And what we discovered, and the attorneys were shocked, is like, how's this been going on for so long? How has nobody actually gone out there and called them on this? So we are now working with some attorneys on some of these cloud seeding programs and projects going on. We can't give details, but we have to kind of wait. There's a little bit of a stall because we have to wait for them to report. And there's a certain 90-day window of time that we can say, okay, you didn't report at all, or you didn't use the most recent studies and and then we can go after them. So there's a window of time and opportunity quite a few months from now where we can actually strike and then take them to court. So we're preparing for that right now. And I would like for all this to have been done last year. I would like for this to be, but I've learned when it comes to the court cases, it goes slow. You got to be methodical. We're coming out the gate. We've got to make sure we don't mess up, and we've got to do it right. So it's not what I thought it was. It's actually quite shocking how, the streaks in the sky that I thought were okay, these are actual geoengineering programs, or spraying us by design, or it's a clear day. Oh, they're not spraying us today. Oh, today's terrible. They're spraying us, this afternoon. No, we're being sprayed every day. It's
Yeah.
raining down heavy
Yeah.
metals every day. And if you see the streaks or don't see the streaks, you're still getting sprayed.
Virtually every leader in the health freedom movement talks about the insecurity of the food supply as one of the primary avenues of tyranny. Our family has rigorously sourced our foods for over a decade, and one of our favorite sources is Farm Match. And specifically, if you are in San Diego, Real Food Club PMA. My kids are literally made from their maple breakfast sausage and the amazing carnitas we make from their pasture-raised pork. But from regeneratively raised raw dairy products to the organic potato chips made in regenerative lard, or anything you might get at your local farmer's market, our family's overall wellness and the security of our food lies in the hands of Farm Match and Real Food Club. I am so excited to be sharing about Farm Match and Real Food Club to offer Future Generations podcast listeners 10% off your first order. You can find the code and link in the show notes. Enjoy the rest of the show. Love and appreciate you all. The desire to go off-grid and disconnect from the system was one of the single most important initiatives any household could have. Whether it is growing our own food, becoming sovereign in our energy production and usage, establishing alternative communication strategies, or digging a well and finding the infinity of primary water. About a year and a half ago, our family moved into our new home in North County, San Diego, on 3 acres of precious land here in America's finest county. One of the first things we did was hire Food Forest Abundance to design a regenerative layout for our land. From the different trees to plant differing berry guilds and synergistic pollinators, to consulting on alternative energy, collecting our rainwater, and even helping us find our local well guy, Food Forest Abundance and their Freedom Farm Academy has been pivotal in the gradual and consistent evolution of our household towards true sovereignty from the system. They have helped us simplify a very confusing process and helped us create the design of our dreams. It doesn't matter if you have 3 acres, dozens or hundreds, or just a small yard. Food Forest Abundance has something to offer you and your family in your journey to move your entire household off-grid. Use the code TheFutureGen to work with the absolute best in the world, Food Forest Abundance, to create your own freedom farm and get off-grid at a discounted rate. It sounds like it's not what we think it is, but it's far more pervasive, and there's far less accountability. There's no oversight. There's no, and it's so long standing. Like the mid 1800s, it's kind of gnarly to think about, because, all the things that have been coming out over the last 4 years, the whole kind of concept of the viruses, of the paucity of science behind, their existence, to, EMFs and radio waves being, the original radio waves being a potential source of what we called epidemics, right? But now there's another layer, right? Where we know that for over essentially 2 centuries, there's this weather manipulation, geoengineering, cloud seeding, whatever it is. I think you have more of a framework as far as like the exact definitions of those. I kind of just amorphously saw them all as the same thing. However, it's far more nefarious. Like it's worse than we potentially.
Right. And the thing is that, so for instance, the legislation we're seeing is, like conscious, geoengineering, right? But what the commercial aircraft is inadvertent.
Yeah.
Inadvertent geoengineering. And they don't talk about that. Now, the thing is what Jim Lee says is there is an AI program that has the ability to ensure that the commercial aircraft do fly at certain grid patterns so that they make sure that those heavy metals are being splayed out where they want them to be used. So it's not that, it's just innocent, they're just spraying and nothing's happening with it. It's like, no. Those heavy metals can be weaponized. They can be manipulated. Those programs that we're talking about that can do that to the commercial airliners is far more complicated and clandestine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we want to fight them, we're like, sorry, but it's for national security reasons. You can't even know about it and you can't do anything about it. It's the military. So, we say to people, I know there's a bit of frustration because people are like, we want you to get rid of the streaks in the sky. It's like, well, we've got to start with the low-hanging fruit where we can actually get some wins. And let me tell you, the cloud seeding, which is extremely ubiquitous from the west of the Rockies all the way to the Pacific coast, because they use the uplift of the air on the mountains to raise and uplift the silver iodide and so on and the sulfur. It's a problem. I mean, we're finding that it's in our rainwater. We're finding it, and they're doing more and more of those programs all the time. In fact, they want to double and triple those programs from what I'm hearing and reading. So we're starting there because we can see where the loopholes are. We can see how they're not abiding by the law. And it's not even a fox watching the hen house. There's not even been a fox, the hens are just running around the hen house. And so this is where we have to start. And then the objective is to build up an awareness where people realize, oh my gosh, this is real. Okay. Cloud seeding, which by the way, cloud seeding was even considered conspiracy theory a few years ago. Now it's in the mainstream. People accept it and they just assume it's been proven safe. And it hasn't. Right. And we've discovered that. And we're like, wow. And again, the attorneys keep saying, we can't believe this has gotten so far. We can't believe that nobody's brought this to court before. We're like, yeah, we agree. So we're starting there. And what's really important too is that Jim Lee talks about language. And when you start talking about chemtrails or even geoengineering, people just shut down like, oh, conspiracy theorists. What we're finding is we have to find an entry point to talking about this where people can keep their minds open. And one of the biggest tools we have, and Catherine Sari's experienced this, and I've experienced this, is that when you test your rainwater and you get the results back and you go to your air water quality board, who it's their job to protect, right? To protect you from, these type of, programs and, poisonings and toxicities and particulate matter. They're not testing for it. They don't even know about it. They don't even know what the healthy levels of inhalable or ingestible particulate matter is. They have no idea. And like, oh, we don't test for this. We never have. We don't know about it. We're like, well, it's in the rainwater. So we're putting the pressure. So that's where we on the ground become very important, start getting our agencies to do the job. But what's really, really powerful is when you show individuals in your respective areas the lab results of your rainwater. Yep. It's not like this isn't happening in Mount Shasta. This isn't happening in somewhere else. This is here. You're breathing it in and ingesting it and drinking it and eating it. Your children are. This is why we have Alzheimer's in bumblebees, in honeybees. This is why we have Alzheimer's in 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds, right? Because their brains are full of aluminum. And so that makes it really, really real. And we are teaching people how to do public records requests, how to get information, what to ask for, who to pursue, how to put them on notice. And even we have some folks working on small claims court. Like, how can we bring the aviation companies? How can we bring the pilots into small claims court and do it a person every single day? So time and time again, you just kind of drain them out. Because I don't like hurting the little guys. But if it's the little guys who are essentially pushing the button to the gas chamber, you got to say to them, you got to stop pushing the button. And so we're trying to go after the big guys, but it looks like where we have to start is with the little guys.
It's interesting. Our podcast, we're called Future Generations for the exact same reason as you call Gen 7, right? And it is our audience. We're mostly parents. We're mostly parents of medical health freedom families. And, we love natural health. We love self-healing. And something that I've seen as a trend, because you're starting to, since COVID, it's like the many people who started to speak out about COVID, the bridge that many of them couldn't get, cross was, okay, we're talking about the COVID shot, but how about all of them? Right? How about all the childhood schedule, right? And what I found, because I've been in practice 13 years, when you're in practice for a long enough period of time, which I think I'm a young guy still, right? And yet you see trends and you start to hear about families who are doing, quote, everything right. And these chronic illnesses still manifesting despite some of these influencers have popped up since COVID. They're like, there are no unvaccinated children that have autism. You're like, you're not in clinical practice every day to see like a body of children who are already, like if we took the literacy I had in 10 years ago of natural health and all those things that worked for optimal health then don't work as effectively today. And so I love this conversation. One, it's frightening, but two, it's like, well, hell, man, like it's the same playbook they have, which is, okay, we don't have liability. We don't have surveillance. We don't have anything. We don't have any foxes and a ton of hens that we can go after. Right. And in the end, you have this lens where it's so simple, because how many of us are just getting dumped on and rain?
Oh,
and how easy is it?
and it's accumulative.
I've been asking. So one thing I wanted to share is like, I interviewed Joel Salatin, right?
Oh, wow. Love him.
One of the regenerative, the godfather of regenerative farming.
Yeah.
I've interviewed Jim Gale. We are a food forest abundance freedom farm, which we're just starting the process of for our home in San Diego.
Nice.
And I've asked these questions like, hey, what about like nanoparticulates? Like you tested my water, but what are we testing for, and how deeply can we actually look at? And most of what I hear is like, well, chlorophyll is nature's detoxifier. Cool. Totally get that. I've never seen an animal be affected by EMFs or chemtrails. Well, you've seen the opposite, right? You've seen trends where you live because you get into altitude and you see those trends. You're seeing it in trees. And it's a gnarly like thought process, because I think what those guys, and this is not a shot against those guys, because I love them and I look up to them, and I'm going to like be doing everything in alignment with them. But I think that you're telling us about a blind spot, that we have a consciousness around it, but we don't, just like maybe we didn't quite get about the EMFs before, and the leveraging of 5G, like you might have had a literacy for, that it's not just faster internet, it's 24-hour surveillance. It's all sorts of nefarious things. And what you're showing to us is that there's a weaponization of particulates that is far more long-standing than we've thought. Yeah.
It's complicated because people don't want to stop flying. And so one of the things we talk about is like, hey, listen, don't let the mother weffers, like, the WEF, use this as an excuse to say, oh, you guys can't fly anymore. Right? And because they will. And we're like, hey, unintended consequences. We don't want them to do that. So people say, well, what do we do? It's like, well, first of all, perhaps we can think differently about flying. Like really, like when we go flying, maybe we don't fly off on vacation every year, but maybe we go every 2 or 3 years and we go for a longer period of time. There's that. But also, can we actually refine the jet fuel even better? So it's not the nano particulate matter. Will that drive up the price of jet fuel and flying? Heck yeah, of course it will. But what's the cost of a dying biosphere? What's the cost of Alzheimer's and cancers and childhood diseases? There's this. None of this is for free. It costs you one way or another. So we have to look at that, and that's and I think what's really difficult for people is it's much easier for us to go, oh, they're geoengineering us. They're bad people. When you're like, oh God, I'm partially responsible for this because I'm flying everywhere. And, so you realize that, wait, I'm kind of responsible for this. It's like, yeah, there's responsibility. So there's that piece. Then there's the shipping piece. And people say, well, how are we going to, stop shipping? It was like a couple different things. One is, I don't think people are going to stop buying from China and, wanting their stuff from Amazon. It's just, we're just good luck, right? It's the number one, habit for Americans is to go shopping and buying things. And so there's a couple different scenarios. One is, which is quite sad, is like, well, if we have a complete economic breakdown and collapse, then we're probably not going to be having a bunch of cargo ships flying, being shipped here. That's good, but there's all these other unintended consequences of a collapsed economy. But this is this thing I say to people is like, look at what I see are the answers are actually really more in our hands than I realize. One of the things we really need to push once again is that America first, American made. We need to bring the manufacturing back to America. It was better quality. We had environmental regulations. We had worker rights. When we shipped off all those raw goods and we're sending over to Asia, we know they don't have environmental regulation, and no matter what, they might be polluting over in Asia,
Right.
but we're still on the same planet. It's going to get to us sooner or later. And they're using child slave labor. They don't have worker rights. The quality is not as good. And it's like, look at folks. And let me tell you, the shipping tracks, the cargo ships are far, 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 far worse than the commercial.
Wow.
And so that is something we have power to change. Like, let's bring back the jobs, bring back the quality work, bring back American made. And,
I love
and
that.
that's something we have power to do. In the meantime, what we have to be conscious of, especially with the small children, the ones who have developing bodies, is you have to make sure that they're doing as much of the heavy, metal detox as possible, because as I said, we're seeing Alzheimer's, we're seeing memory loss in young people today, and that's not natural.
Tell me a little bit more about the testing. I would love it to get very practical for, like, can we test our trees? Is that something
if you have a tree that has died, I actually like all of a sudden, just out of the blue, and we were having people saying to us that, oh, it's from the bark beetle, or it's from the drought. And we kept having people tell us that. And we're like, no, it's not, because we have trees that were literally on the banks of the river that would, within 5 days, would just die, just like that. And it's like, it's not the drought. They're next to a river, so it's not the drought. So, and what was interesting is we have a cabin up off what's called the Yuba River. And it was just like a real haven. It was like we go there, the trees are very healthy, pristine. And get this, as soon as Elon Musk started shooting up his satellites, or whatever they are, weather balloons, all of a sudden the trees started to die at a rapid rate. And what we found out is that they have customers, they're sending down a 5G millimeter wave beam, which is kind of funny because they keep telling us that millimeter wave doesn't travel very far. And I'm like, that is a justification for antennas everywhere, 5G antennas everywhere. I'm like, well, that's funny. So if a millimeter wave doesn't travel very far, then why is it you can shoot it from a satellite? Which one is it? So there's a little bit of a moment, but so what we know is if you have a customer, they will shoot this little beam of millimeter wave down to the customer, but by the time it hits the earth, it's almost a mile wide. So you have a customer here, you have a customer there, and you're out in the rural areas, and all of a sudden you've got 5G beaming down all left and right, and you're wondering why all of a sudden our dragonflies have disappeared. Our bat population, our bird population has gone down. The trees are dying. This just started just a few years ago, as soon as Elon Musk started shooting up with his sounding rockets these satellites, and they're punching holes like Swiss cheese into the ozone. So we've got some serious issues here. And so if you go on to saveourskies.org, you can scroll down the halfway on the landing page, and you'll see on the left side it says Save Our Skies, How to Become a SOS Skywatcher PowerPoint Toolkit. What we do is we actually explain to you how to collect a rain sample, right? We're like, clean plastic containers, not metal, not glass. You want a whole bunch of containers all over the place, and you really only need about this much to actually test. You don't need a lot, right? Like a quarter of a cup. And then there's a couple different things. We have McCampbell Analytical, which is a certified lab. But you can also, if you have I just found this out, if you have an agricultural university, like, Davis University or anything, you can actually contact them, and they will, for free, because like McCampbell will cost you like about $160, and they will, for free, if you ask them, can you test for these particular metals, they'll do it for you.
That's
so
great.
we just found that out. I was like, holy cow, that's great, because it's $160 is quite a bit, and that's per rain sample. So what you're testing for is called, I think it's called CAM 17 generally is what it's called, and ultimately, what you're looking at to test for is aluminum. This is crazy. This is what we're finding in the rain. Aluminum, barium, chromium, copper, lead, magnesium, nickel, strontium, titanium, vanadium, and zinc. And if you plan on taking this to court, you want to get what's a chain of custody form. And what we are doing with Save Our Skies is every second Tuesday And every fourth Wednesday, we have our Save Our Skies swarm webinar, like swarming like bees, right? So that's from 6 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. I go on, Catherine Sari joins us, Jeff the meteorologist, Jim Lee from Climate Viewer, and we will answer your questions. We will hold your hand. We'll tell you like whatever you need to do. And we just really try to cattle shoot people into that second Tuesday, fourth Wednesday, because otherwise we get bombarded. People are like, hey, how do you do it?
Right.
I mean, we're getting calls from Costa Rica, England, Canada, Australia. It's just, we have to just kind of, as I said, kind of cattle shoot people into that particular 2 webinars. And they've been very successful. Then it goes into specifically how to test, how to even print your label, how to ship it. And then, how to wait for their email for confirmation, and, how to authorize the payment, all these specific little details. And then what we do in our slide presentation, that's on our Save Our Skies, then we get into, okay, so once you get your rain results, this is how you begin to write your correspondence, right? You contact your local air pollution control district. You contact the California, if you're in California, State Water Resources Control Board. And then what you do is you share results, and what you do, which is really smart, Catherine Sari was doing this, is that when you are emailing these individuals, you make sure that you CC everybody, your county supervisors, your city council members. You don't want to be having a communication with them in a silo. You want them to see that everyone else is being CC'd and they see what's going on. It puts on the pressure. And then you share the results. And if they don't know, like if you say, hey, can you please tell us what are the healthy levels for inhalation for this or for ingestion? More than likely, they're going to say, well, I don't know. And then that's when you start to say, well, okay, don't you think that it's your job as the Air Water Quality Board that maybe you should? So this part is huge, folks. This is where we have got to start pressuring our local respective agencies on, we've got a problem. It's in our rainwater, and you need to find out what the healthy levels are, and you need to start testing regularly, because we are seeing symptoms of heavy metal toxicity from the insects to the pollinators to the children to the adults. It's in our food, it's in our water, it's in our soil. And if they continue to ignore you, which they can do after a while, then you need to start getting your friends out there, and you need to start getting in front of those actual agency buildings,
Right.
and you start protesting, and you call your local news, right? The media, the newspaper, your local, whatever, Sacramento News, wherever you are, and saying, hey, we're down here because we've got a problem. And there's absolutely not one single person, including those on the commission, who are not being impacted by this. And so what we're trying to do is, as we build our legal cases, as we start building out the whole notice of liability, the objective is to create an awareness. And it's a very simple entry point that is provable. It's not conspirator. It's just like, here you go. This is a fact. What are you going to do about it? And then we can put the pressure on. And then our objective is to kind of start working our way up that chain, where we can start saying, okay, airlines, we've got an issue. And we're not saying that we want you to go with these biofuels or synthetic whatever else, because again, it might be worse than the actual original fuel, but maybe we have to actually refine it even more so, test it for nanoparticulate matter. And then hopefully we can actually have the legislators, or we can start putting pressure on the military saying, you got to stop sending up the sounding rockets. You're punching holes in our ozone. You've got to stop the clandestine programs. You're killing us. And I don't care if it's for national security. It doesn't help us. It's for national security if we're all dead. Right?
Do you have any success stories you could tell us about, as far as like, whether it's the letters, the notices of liabilities, or some of the small claims court, and what like you've seen as trends in certain counties? Because I would say something that we realized, I just did an interview with Amy Reichert last week, and she was talking about the homeless population, the flooding population. Yeah. And in the end, it was just like, wow, like we now know that our county supervisors are completely compromised. We know, like, since early 2020 that WEF, World Economic Forum, had already basically taken over, our entire county, all 3 million people of us. Right. And so in the end, I'm curious what you have seen in the different areas as far as
Well,
success?
when you talk to Cal Washington, he's done such a beautiful job
Hmm.
of these notice of liabilities and putting these individuals on personal notice. Like, no, 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 we're not going after you and your seat. We're going after your assets, your home, your
Mm.
bank accounts. And they've been actually putting very, very highly elevated leaders around the world on notice, and they just step down. They just they just go
Wow.
away,
Wow.
right? And they're not going to announce to you, hey, we've got this notice of liability, therefore I got to. They just kind of like quietly go away. Now people say, well, okay, great, but are they just going to be replaced with somebody else? Like, yeah, they will, but you do the same thing to them. And after a while, people hate walking around with a target on their back. So the notice of liabilities are having some really good impact. The other thing is Catherine Sari actually put on notice. They were about ready to do Oxitec GMO mosquitoes. And she went out after Oxitec. She put the leaders on notice, like, hey, do you even know this is happening? And the program was killed. And she was doing
Wow.
that through public records request. She was doing that, by putting them on notice. And this is the thing is that because they're so, busy looking at this or watching that or thinking that somebody else has this taken care of,
Right.
nobody is putting these people on notice. And when they start to realize that you're watching them, that you're actually watching them, communicating, doing public records requests, putting them on notice, and by the way, you're notifying all these different leaders and elected officials, it does make them nervous. And so I think it's a multi-pronged approach. And I think the public pressure is huge. And I think the notice of liabilities, especially if they do not respond, especially if they're part of the air or water quality boards and they don't respond,
Mhm.
then it's like, oh, then that means you're actually part of the criminal enterprise
I love that.
and we're going after you.
I love that.
And I don't like playing cutthroat like this. I don't like doing this to individuals, but I also don't like watching people get sick, never being able to recover, our biosphere imploding, our trees dying, our insects going away. I'm like, I'm pissed. And if it takes us going after the little guy who is pushing the button to the gas chamber, guess what? We're going after the little guy pushing, the button, because if they wouldn't push the button, it wouldn't happen.
So many people have asked me what I do to stay mentally and physically resilient in the midst of the unending polarization, fear, and tyranny. Literally nothing has made a bigger impact for me than daily cold plunging. 3 minutes, 37 degrees every morning for over a year now. My friends, I wanted to tell you about the Edge Tub from Edge Theory Labs. Their portable and inflatable tub can alternate between an ice bath and hot tub. I've been regenerating the benefits of cold plunging every day, like better sleep, better focus, and more energy. We have had some really amazing interviews to learn more about cold exposure. But in the meantime, I invite you to check out Edge Theory Labs' website to learn more. I'm also happy to share an exclusive offer for Future Generations podcast listeners, $150 off using the code TheFutureGen. You can find more info in the show notes. Get cold. What's up, FG fam? One of the single best companies whose products have supported the optimal wellness of our family for years is Earthly Wellness. Kate TG and her team have stood for truth, health, and freedom in ways that paved the way for so many of us. They experienced heavy levels of censorship long before it was popularized, and they stood strong and persevered. Their products are clean, cost-effective, and honestly, they work for all ages. From supporting my wife, our oldest, and our little guy, Earthly Wellness provides products that have been foundational for our family for years. We especially use their products right before bedtime. Their Feel Better Fast and other herbal tinctures are some of the best in the world, as well as their amazing Goodnight Lotion, the magnesium oil, are mainstays. I am so excited to be partnering with Earthly to offer Future Generations podcast listeners 10% off your first purchase. You can find the code link in the show notes. Enjoy the rest of the show. Love and appreciate you all. Well, let's just call a spade, right? If you just use the entire vaccine industry for the last 40 years, the one wild card they've always had is no liability. That's
No
it.
liability.
That's
That's
it.
right.
You can't sue.
That's right.
If you can't sue, there's
That's
no
right.
discovery. If there's no discovery, then you have no concept, right? And I've been putting this out I just taught a vaccine workshop, the first one I've done since 2020, standing room only. And in the end, it was like, I let people know this is not going to be a conversation on efficacy. Like we're not going to talk about smallpox and polio and measles and those. We're going to talk about safety. And we're going to talk about the paucity of research for safety, that there's no long-term inert placebo randomized controlled clinical trial for any shot, right? And if that's the case, then it's a simple equation that risk equals 1 over safety. And if there is no safety, or at best it's unknown, then at best the risk is unknown. That's the best. The worst is that the risk approaches infinity, and now it's like, wait, what's infinity? Somebody asked me that the other day. I was like, people could die. And you're like, oh, risk infinity is like people could die. And so let's use that same equation on every other nefarious agenda. Why? Because it didn't matter if you were a public figure. It didn't matter if you were all the way down to a nurse. The leveraging of shame, guilt, coercion, manipulation, fear, everything that they did to throw at everybody for COVID, they had already been doing for decades for childhood shots. They still do, because there's no liability. You can't sue anyone up that chain until what sounds like now, right?
You're asking for trouble.
Yeah.
You're asking for death. You're asking for maiming and injury. It's like it's a setup. You're just setting the ball up at the net. That's what you're doing with no liability. And that's what the military also hides under, right? And the alphabet agencies and the CIA. And I mean, they're just like, oh, no liability. You can't even know about it because of national security. And it's like, well, national security, what are you securing if you're not securing the people? What are you securing? If you're not securing our well-being, then what are you securing?
Exactly.
And but again, we've got to wake people up at a level where we can meet them. And so, and I have people saying, well, can't we go after the big guy? I'm like, no, we can't go. I really wish we could go after the big guy, right?
Yeah.
But that's not an entry point for us. And again, trust me, the cloud seeding they're doing is harming us.
Yeah.
It's harming us. It's poisoning our food, our water, and our soil and our bodies. And so it's like, it's not a little small something. It's been going on for decades and just assumed safe. And I mean, I assumed it was like relatively safe because it's been going on forever. Well, guess what? Now we come to find out no one's been watching the hen house. And so we've got to start there. And then once we get those wins, people go, oh, whoa. So I guess there is nobody watching the hen house. I guess if that wasn't safe, if that was harmful, then what about this? And again, I want to make very clear, because people kind of spin out. It's taken a long time for us to convince people geoengineering is going on. So when they hear me or Jim Lee or somebody else say, hey, it's not like they're out there with these big canisters and aerosols. Those exist. Those planes, those retrofitted planes exist. They do have nozzles. They do have that stuff does exist. But the day in, day out pattern you see of what looks like, chemtrails is the commercial aircraft industry, and it is the right atmosphere conditions for you to see them. But whether you see them or not, you're getting sprayed.
I love it.
And so that is really hard for people to wrap their minds around, because it's taken a long time for us just to convince people geoengineering is going on. So now we're like, oh, well, wait a second. Now we got to kind of back up again and say, well, it's not exactly what we've been told. And so that's been really hard for people to digest. And I have to say, Stan, though, when I was hearing this, I was like, wait, what? I'm like, no, that's not what I know to be true. And ultimately I had to ask myself, are you here to prove yourself right? Or are you here to stop the perpetration, however that may be? What's your job? It's like, I'm here to stop the perpetration, whatever form that may be.
I think it's amazing. I think it is, in my opinion, it may cause you unsettling, right? This conversation at large is just maybe rearing the head, because it's easy to go out and be like, there it is again, they're spraying us. But it's like, behind that is often like, what are you going to do about it? And it's awesome to know that. And I love the strategy too, because it's obvious to us that these corporatocracies have a level of immunity, just inherent to the structure of their organization that protects these people, when in reality, the loudness of the notices of liability and these public records and all these things. It's just so much more, I think, attainable. And I think at the same time, it's real time. It's real time in real life, you know, and it's good to make it personal. I don't love, like you said, I don't love attacking little guys either.
No.
But if we could all go back to, you know, the gas chambers of World War II, you know, let's just say many people would probably go back and be like, yeah, that guy that was like gassing people probably should like, you probably could go back to that 1%, right?
Yeah,
and
if the little guy doesn't take the orders from the big guy, it doesn't get executed. Exactly. It doesn't happen.
Exactly.
And so like we got to go after the little guys. Like you guys have got to, you know, and the thing is that it is important to put them on notice because and show them evidence like, hey, you're actually causing harm. It's important to give them a chance. It's because they know. I mean, there's a lot of people who are just a lot of people out there think they're doing good work and they believe this is what they're doing and that's what they're doing. And they don't know because they've been convinced differently. So you got to put them on notice and give them time to respond. And then if they continue to do what they're doing, it's like, okay, now you're consciously committing a crime and we're going to go after you personally. And so that's where we are. And the other thing is really important is that we've got to stop looking at other people to be the leader.
Right.
Have you ever seen that famous video? It was one of the founders of TEDx where they talk about how to start a movement.
Yes.
Yep. And they show a guy kind of out there dancing all funny outside on the lawn, you know. Yeah. And he's like, this guy, he's a leader. It's not the leader, right? That's like he's like kind of boogieing, making funny movements. But it's when the second guy comes along and the first guy who's a leader shows the second guy the moves. And then the second guy goes, hey, friend. And then his friends come in. And the next you've got this gigantic, massive people. And they're all dancing really wonky. That's awesome. What we're trying to create. It's like we're not looking for a leader. We need all the people coming in, teaching each other the moves, and we dance en masse. We don't become the one honeybee or the two honeybees. We're a swarm of bees because one or two bees is not going to take you down. A swarm of bees can kill you, can take you down. And so our objective is to create a swarm of people in their respective locations doing the same work, heading in the same direction and on point, knowing what it is they're doing, what the outcome that they're actually seeking. And that is going to take a momentous amount of work. And so what we're trying to say to people, I have people coming up saying, thank you, Reinette, for doing this. I'm like, don't you dare. Don't you dare say I'm doing this. I'm not doing this for you, and I'm not going to do it alone. And if you expect me to do it, it's not going to get done. It's got to be, we're going to teach you that old fishing, we'll teach you to fish and not just fish for you. We're going to teach you to fish. And if you really care, you're going to have to do it in your own community. And it is a learning curve. It is a paradigm shift. And you will find you go between being a student to teacher, you go back and forth. And you've got to, and I continue to let go of your preconceived notions of what you think is happening above our heads, because it was like a little existential crisis. I was like, wait, what? It's not what I thought. It's not what I was taught by those out there in the geoengineering world saying it's this. That makes so far into the conspiracy world that the ones over here you can't even talk to them about it. Right. But when you say, hey, the commercial aircraft, it's nanoparticulate matter in the jet fuel. Here's the rainwater results. It's spraying whether you see the streaks or not every single day. People are like, wait, they're like, what? Now you can start the conversation.
What is one thing that you suggest we do?
Well, I do suggest that if you're really interested is to go on our Save Our Skies, go on to our couple of webinars, and they're repetitive. I mean, you're always going to get different information because kind of hit different. I mean, it's a huge, huge topic, right? But we do repeat certain things over and over. So you kind of like it, we drill it in and you get to learn about it. And if you go onto our webinars, then we really suggest you get onto that Flight Radar 24 or the ABDS exchange, and you get familiar with the flight patterns over your heads. You look for, and also going on to NOAA, which you explain to people how to do. And you look for the cloud seeding weather modification programs that are just out there. And these are not the federal, these are the private, right? This is like in the corporate private world. The federal clandestine government programs aren't there, but you become familiar. And if you see, we do have cloud seeding programs in our area, you start looking for them. We're literally trying to teach you how to read the skies.
Wow. That's
Then you
amazing.
can find out who the aviation company is, who the pilot is, right?
Hmm.
Then what you do is you get that water tested. You got the results. You show them how it's causing harm. You put them on notice. You go to your local. I mean, you have to ask the question, how important is your life? How important is the biosphere? How
Right.
important is your future, your children's future? It's collapsing around us. It is collapsing. And again, this is a huge learning curve. It kind of, it's a bit of a mind melt at first. You're like, oh my God, my brain's going to explode. I don't know about this. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to read the apps. I don't know how to read the sky. It's like you just get familiar with it. And like I said, Catherine will be out there in her gardening, and she'll hear like she's like, oh, that's a Cessna, blah blah blah. Oh, that's a Black Hawk.
That's
And,
funny.
Black
Yeah.
Hawk. She knows now, right? And then she'll go running out, and her kids, she gets her kids involved. So they got the app like, oh, look at that sat and da da da. And that's what I recommend. And please don't listen to this interview and think, oh, I'm so glad Save Our Skies and Reinette has it covered. It's like, no, no, no.
Yeah.
This is all hands on deck.
I
And
love
and
it.
our attorneys say, like, don't think we're going to court without a groundswell of public pressure, because if this is done in a silo and the court and the judge don't think all eyes are on them, they'll do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And even then, you can't put all your eggs in that basket anyway, right? We've been trying to separate the eggs into different baskets so we have better odds. And so that's what I recommend. And just talk to people, like actually say to them, oh, this is what we know now. It's in the jet fuel. Not that they can't add additional additives. God only knows what they're
Hmm.
putting. Not that there aren't geoengineering programs. There are spraying consciously. Those things are happening. Nefarious programs are happening. The persistent contrails, that was Jim likes to say the plane farts. They're being weaponized. They're being manipulated, and we've got to work our way up that chain of command and bring this to an end.
How are they manipulated and weaponized?
Well, I think it depends. I think it depends with ionosphere heaters. It
Hmm.
depends on with HARP,
Yep.
how they can actually maybe move the heavy metals. The other thing that we discovered, Catherine had pointed out, and Jim knew this, is that what they also do, like for instance, this is so bad with the cloud seeding. In order for them to see like where the cloud seeding is going, you'll see some on these meteorologists will talk about, oh, that's just military chaff. They're just spraying chaff. So you see this weird kind of funky
Yeah.
cloud in the radar. That's
I've
just
seen that.
military chaff is aluminum
Hmm.
coated fiberglass that carries with the wind so they can see like where the cloud seeding goes. So every time you, oh, it's just military chaff, it's like this is aluminum coated fiberglass. Do you know how bad? And you're eating it, you're inhaling it. It's like, do you understand what that means? So our attorneys look at this and they're like, how the hell has this been going on for so long, unabated?
Wow.
And so we're calling it out, and we really do need all hands on deck, and we need attorneys too. I mean, it helps us to have attorneys who know how to go into the Westlaw nexus, and they know how to look for cases to help us kind of do the research. We've got money, but their attorneys are working for discounted. We have some legal folks working for free or very little. And we just, we'd love to have some assistance in certain things. So it's really nice, especially environmental attorneys, to assist us with this, because we have constitutional attorneys, tort attorneys. They've been working it from this perspective, but we're like, no, as we've been looking at, we're like, we really have to go the environmental route.
Yeah.
Procedural route, where they're not doing the procedures that are legally required. So we need those kind of attorneys who specialize in that, like CEQA, NEPA, and assist us with that.
I think I resonate very deeply with your message, especially with the all hands on deck. I have had for 4 years now, like people come up to me thanking me for being vocal, thanking me for telling the truth. And some chiropractors will whisper, and I'll be like, why are you whispering? Like no one cares, because actually people want you to tell the truth. And why aren't you? And it's one of those moments that if we don't stand up for this, if we don't stand up for the many aspects that we are being assaulted, then, I've said for many, many years now, I don't like the fact that I've been saying it for years. It's like, then we just obligate our children to take it on. And it's going to be a bigger problem than we have the opportunity to move the needle on right now.
Yeah, it's hard to undo that kind of damage. And I've
Yeah.
been saying this since I've known you. I said, we will be, those of us who remain, will be spending the rest of our lives restoring and healing the planet. And we will be building economies based upon this because we will have no other choice. And that's not a bad thing, because if we can build economies based upon raping the planet and resource extraction, we can certainly build economies based upon restoration and healing.
Love that.
And we're going to have to heal the soil. We're going to have to heal the water. And we can do it. There are technologies out there and also natural things we can do to do this stuff, but we've got to get on it. And as I said, I've seen a huge, many of us have, decrease in the pollinator, the bug population, the bird population, wildlife in general. I'm like, how much more can it decline before it just can't come back? So this is all hands on deck.
Reinette, you are amazing. You're an amazing leader. You're an inspiring person that's not leading alone, right? You're encouraging us to be highly involved in this. I think the agenda and Save Our Skies, Flight Radar 24, you name it, all the things, all the resources, just make sure we have all of those so that we can put those in the show notes. But this is something that I've been thinking about for a long time. And I've been thinking about it because I have the pulse of my community in an amazing county like San Diego, and I have heard more than others because more people express truth in my office than virtually other practices because of how we've spoken the truth to our community. And I've heard that more families that believe what we believe are affected with chronic challenges in their children, despite doing everything that they can in the right way. If you need a vehicle to make real change, from even Cal Washington, InPower, and all the resources that you shared are all amazing, and they're all going to be things that, we're going to be a lot more involved in now that we've had this conversation.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Stanton, because getting the word out is half the battle. So just thank you for doing this. And it's great to see you. It's been way overdue.
I know. As you probably know, I'm the clinic director of the Future Generations Clinic of Chiropractic. I wanted to invite those of you in the greater San Diego area to come check us out. We expect and experience miracles in our office every day and would love for you to experience the same, as well as your family, especially your kids. This month, we're offering our new patient package for just $67 for podcast listeners. The offer retails at $349 and includes an in-depth consultation where our patients literally tell us we know more about their family's health in the first 15 minutes than virtually every doctor on their healthcare team combined. Our state-of-the-art clinical workup, including Insight nervous system scans, full spine digital x-rays, and a functional exam. We also include a full report of your results, a customized plan to realize your greatest health potential, as well as your first adjustment in our office. Check out the link in the show notes for all the details and claim the offer. Love and appreciate you all.